everyone loves a hero. Everyone loves a winner. And Shah Alam was all sorts of things, but he always lost.
Lost, that's true.
And yet he is this dignified. In his youth, he's this handsome young prince who cuts his way out of Delhi when he's about to be assassinated by this sort of psychotic vizier called Imad-ul Mulk. And he gathers an army, and he's just too late because the Plassi's just happened. The company's now established in Bengal with its new military technology. And he's just a year, 2 years too late.
Hello and welcome to Bibliofile. Any new book by William Dalrymple is always a major event. You know, it creates waves both in literary circles and among his millions of fans. He has this unique ability of diving into history, going into back in time and coming up with gems which people seem to have missed so far. And here we have, thank you very much William Dalrymple for joining Bibliophile. Here we are here to discuss his new book, The Anarchy, which is already, I think, it's topped almost all charts so far, and it's on its way to becoming a bestseller. This is his
it's number one here. Number 4 in England and number 9 in the States.
Wow, fantastic! There you are. And so this is his. That's the amazing part. He makes history so thrilling. It's such a nail-biting read. Actually, that's what makes him so popular.
I think people in India always say that it's odd that history is thrilling, but history usually is thrilling. In a sense, the miracle is that many practitioners of Indian history manage to make it so dull. Because you don't have to make anything up. It's already a Game of Thrones script, most of India's history. There's fantastic characters, extraordinary violence, incredible beauty, amazing storylines, and still you manage to get people turned off history en masse. It's incredible. Why the academic part of it? Why is it always? Why should it be dull? Well, what's odd is if you look at, for example, at Harvard, in the last 5 years at Jaipur, we must have had 15 Harvard professors that have run Pulitzer-winning books that have been big bestsellers. This year we've got the amazing Stephen Greenblatt coming, whose book on Renaissance art history, The Swerve, was number 1 on the New York Times bestseller list for 6 months. But for some reason, while India produces a disproportionate amount of really good fiction, and there's rarely a year when there isn't an Indian on the Booker shortlist. This year we had Salman Rushdie, for example. That's more or less, you're surprised if one hasn't won it.
That's true. It's almost a given,
But the same is not true of Indian non-fiction yet. And although there's lots of very bright young stars emerging, like Manu Pillai or Raghu Karnad, it's to this day the Bailey Gifford, which used to be called the Samuel Johnson, which is the non-fiction equivalent of the Booker. I think only what's he called? Savi Subramaniam, writing on Sri Lanka, and Ram Guha's cricket book were long-listed. Other than that, I don't think there's been. I think I'm right in saying there hasn't been a single Indian author ever made it to the shortlist, which is extraordinary. Because this country has a million stories, whether it's in journalism or in history or in biography.
Absolutely, yes.
And there just so far isn't the same literary excellence that you get in fiction passing into non-fiction. I don't know why that is. I can't answer that question. It's a very stark difference between if India was to field a fiction first 11, it would be the world-beating team with Roy, Ghosh, Rushdie, Vikram Seth. It could take on any other national team in the world. But if you were to, the Indian non-fiction first 11 would be a bit further down.
That's true.
And particularly, I think it's true in terms of history. None of the academics here, I'm trying to think of an exception, and can't, frankly. None of the academics write top quality literary non-fiction that has made the crossover from academe to and I think most of them are still terribly frightened of being seen as populist.
That's what it's. Why is it considered slightly lower?
Well, if you look at the kind of work that the greatest historians in the world are doing, sitting in Harvard, sitting in Cambridge, there are every year one wins the Pulitzer.
And they're on NYT top sellers list. It's like
and a big serious biography of an American president will always be a #1 item, cover of the New York Times, and it's just I mean, it's beginning to happen here. Raghu winning that massive prize he won this year is the first time an Indian non-fiction writer, with the exception, I tell you the other exception is Suketu Mehta. Maximum City was shortlisted for the Pulitzer in non-fiction. But Raghu, Suketu, Ram Guhar apart, it's odd the absence of non-fiction, and frankly what I'm doing with Indian history is no different from what a lot of my British and American contemporaries are doing with their history. For example, Simon Sebag Montefiore's books on the Romanovs, or Stalin, or Jerusalem, or Anthony Beevor's books on Stalingrad. Maya Jazilov in Harvard, her extraordinary books on the American Revolution and so on. These are books which are up for prizes, which are top of the bestseller list. They're incredibly scholarly. They're often the result of 10 or 15 years work, but they're incredible. But for some reason, Indian academics, particularly Indian historians, just don't seem to be venturing into that territory.
In fact,
they have to. I mean, there's no rule they have to do it, but it's odd that they're not.
In fact, I mean, a book like this, for instance, I mean, it's one feels that it's been attempted before. I mean, it's not something new that you've come up with, but it's the way it's told. It's the sort of the structure of the book, the architecture, of course the language, and the, as I said, these gems that these which historians probably don't.
Yes and no about whether it's been attempted before. Yes, there's been lots of work on the East India Company, which is really quite well covered. Particularly, there was an older generation of Bengali historians who did incredible work on the company. Kumkum Chatterjee, who's no longer with us, did all the groundbreaking work on how the Indian financial classes, particularly the Marwaris, were bankrolling the company. And she did really detailed economic work over the 70s and 80s. I mean, long list of names, but alive today still and publishing at his peak is Rajat Datta at JNU. He's studied the East India Company and particularly the Bengal famine and the rural Bengal economy. There's a lot of that. The thing that I think is new in this book and hasn't been done since the 18th century is the story of Shah Alam, who's at the centre of the book.
True.
And the last really good book on Shah Alam was written by somebody called Michael Franklin, who worked for the company in the 1780s.
In fact, I would, if you could just briefly, this most amazing character. I mean, it's this, if you would like to just talk a little bit about him, it's this most fascinating, well, melancholic, all,
tragic.
It's tragic, it's, but a very interesting character. I mean, why has he been, I mean, not so much the, footnotes, but he's not really been, he really comes alive here in this book.
So there's two reasons, I think. Everyone loves a hero. Everyone loves a winner. And Shah Alam was all sorts of things, but he always lost.
That's true.
And yet he is this dignified. In his youth, he's this handsome young prince who cuts his way out of Delhi when he's about to be assassinated by this sort of psychotic vizier called Imadul Mulk. And he gathers an army, and he's just too late because the Plassi's just happened. The company's now established in Bengal with its new military technology, and he's just a year, 2 years too late. If he'd got in there literally 5 years earlier, he would have recovered the Mughal Empire. But he's too late. And then it goes from bad to worse. He's defeated by the company, he's kept as a puppet, he insists on going back to Delhi against everyone's advice, and there he's blinded by Ghulam Qadir, his former favourite, who straddles him and first pokes out his pupil with a dagger, and the next day actually gouges out his eyes with his thumbs. I mean, there's a double blinding, this unbelievable brutality, and the Persian sources I've been using are very interesting because quite a lot of them were translated in the Victorian period, when the sort of thing which the historians are putting into Ghulam Qadir's mouth about what he was going to do to the Mughal princesses and so on was not translatable. So I think this is actually the first time they've ever been translated in full into English in the unbowdlerized full horror of it. And it's a terrible horror story. I mean, quite Tarantino has violence quite as
like this,
terrible as this. And so by the end, Shah Alam, who you meet at the beginning as this handsome young prince, full of ideals and aspirations, by the end is this broken old man, blinded, living in a ruined palace. The blind emperor of an illusionary empire.
Also this is one. The other most fascinating part is this little company in the dockyards of London, with 30 people, I think, working for it, this East India Company. It comes all the way here, I mean, unknown territory, and takes on the Mughal Empire, and it's, I mean, that part is, you may hear it.
Story. It's so improbable that if it was a fiction, no one would believe it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it seems it's far more. Yeah.
So the story is that it's founded. The company's founded in 1599, around the time that Shakespeare is writing Hamlet. Hamlet is first performed, I think, 2 months after the company's founded.
Okay.
And initially, it's the world's first big joint stock company. There have been 3 or 4 other attempts at this before with the Muscovy Company and some others, but this is the first one that really takes off, and a lot of London money goes into it, not just the big ship owners, but the quite modest haberdashers, skinners, vintners put their money into this, hoping to make their fortune, and they do, because the first expedition gets to the Indies, comes back, they raid a Portuguese galleon or something, and they sell it for £1 million. So the company gets off to a good start, but it's kicked out eventually from the spice trade by the Dutch, who are much more powerful at that period than the British, and they choose the second best trade, which is the textile trade coming out of India. And this was an incredibly lucky step, because the Mughal Empire is just really getting going. The Bengal is about to become the world's industrial centre,
the hub of,
with 1 million weavers in Bengal producing silks and chintzes and buffed hawa, these wonderful, very thin dupattas and so on, that are wanted everywhere. And the company grows as the shipper of the Mughals. The Mughal Empire, and people tend to dismiss it sometimes here today, particularly those from the Hindutva right, as these sort of effete emperors who just built tombs. But the reality is that the Mughals actually, for the first time in entire Indian history, overtook China as the world's leading industrial producers. And a lot of this is coming out of Bengal and Telangana. That coast is producing these incredible textiles, and the people who are shipping it around the world are the company. So they make this incredible fortune, and for 150 years, the company remains happy to really just be a shipping agency for the Mughal Empire. All this incredible stuff. So much is produced, for example, that there's deindustrialization in Mexico because of the quantity of cheap Indian cotton being that far over across the world. And the people who are moving it around the world are the company, and they're taking their cut. And then this strange thing happens. This company has just got one small office in the City of London. It's got a dockyard at Deptford where it produces a few ships each year. The head office is only 5 windows wide, 3 stories high. It's not big. I mean, it's no bigger than the Outlook office, frankly. It employs rather fewer people. It has 35. How many people do you employ?
Yeah, we have much more than that.
This is 35 people 100 years into its history, and yet the skeleton staff pull off this incredibly audacious, what is frankly the greatest corporate takeover in world history. They take over the Mughal Empire, and the Mughal Empire at this point, England's producing 3% of world manufactures. The Mughal Empire is producing, coming on for 1/3 of the world's total manufactures. And it's this vast and rich empire, stretching from the Carnatic right up to Kabul. And out of this, incredible textiles coming, and the company's cashing in by shipping it. And then, in the 1750s, it all changes gear, because there's been an industrial, beginning of an industrial, but a military revolution in Europe. The Austrian War of Succession, the Spanish War of Succession has happened, and amazing new military techniques have been developed, particularly by Frederick the Great in Prussia. And the first to bring these to India are the French. And first of all, it's French sepoys, and there's one battle that's forgotten today, the Battle of the Adyar River, southern Madras, when I think 700 French sepoys see off 30,000 Mughal cavalry. And from that point, for about 30 years, both the French and the English have this technology in their military departments, which can basically defeat any army in India, however big, however powerful. And the first guy to really feel the heat of this is Siraj ud-Dowlah, the Nawab of Bengal, who tries to stop the company from fortifying Calcutta. He goes in, takes Calcutta, and by incredible bad fortune, the Royal Navy, for the first time in its history, at that moment happens to have sent a fleet to India, not to take on Siraj ud-Dowlah, but to take on the French, who they think are about to invade India. And it's pure bad luck for the Bengalis. you know, he could have taken it at any other time in history, but this one particular moment, literally the day that the news arrives in Madras, Clive has docked just a little bit further down the coast. And Clive sails north, takes Calcutta back, destroys the French headquarters of Chandanagar, and then something crucial happens. The Jagat Seth, who is the richest banker in the world, and is to 18th century India what the Rothschilds would be in 19th century Europe, and able to play politics and rise and fall of dynasties and so on. The Jagat Seth simply sends a message to Clive saying, I'll give you £2 million if you get rid of this psycho. Suraj Dowlah rather unwisely had threatened to circumcise the Jagat Seth, which didn't go down well with the Marwari establishment, and so they simply affected what we would call today regime change.
In fact, that is a important sort of this role of this Jagat Seth in West Bengal here, and also the other bankers down south.
Correct.
You know, their role in making the company really sort of. Why did this happen? Why did they ditch their old sort of customers and go on to the...
This, for a modern reader, is the most difficult thing to understand, because to our eyes, you know, these are incoming, they're different nation, they're different religion, they're different language. Why on earth would an Indian banker choose to side with a foreigner against their own rulers? The answer is that they spoke the same language, and that was the language of commerce and finance. That the company may loot, plunder, asset strip, but it repaid its debts on time with interest. It had civil courts where commercial contracts could be disputed and upheld. And very early on, the Indian merchant classes recognize a partner in the company. The partner borrows money for them, it repays them, they make a lot of business out of the company. And frankly, you know, half the production in Bengal is for export, and if the company wasn't there, they wouldn't be exporting it.
Yes, that's right.
So the Jagat Seths for a long time see the company as business partners, but when they see the power of the new Royal Navy ships and the new Marines who come ashore at Chandanagar and just wipe out the French settlement.
So they are backing the winners. I mean, they kind of know who
they just realise that these guys are powerful enough to get rid of Suraj. And Suraj has fallen out with the Marwaris. He's threatened them with circumcision, and they say, you know, we don't have to put up with this. And so they just quietly send a note saying we want regime change. And poor old Mir Jafar, who's normally regarded in this country as the traitor, you know, the symbol of betrayal. He's also just part of the plot of the Jagat Seth. He's also paid by the Jagat Seths to not fight at Plassey and to replace Suraj. And so the real, I mean, if you want to look for someone to blame for what happens at Plassey from the Indian perspective, it's not Mir Jafar, who's merely a puppet. He's a rather thick, uneducated Arab general from Najaf in modern Iraq. He's illiterate. He can't read. He's no brilliant strategist. The brilliant strategist is the Jagat Seth. And it's not the first time they've done this. Suraj Dowlah's grandfather, Ali Verdi Khan, had been put into his job in a coup organised by the Jagat Seths 40 years earlier. This is the second time they do it. And then subsequent to that, you see, you get the company breaking up a lot of the old Mughal estates, and these huge Mughal land holdings, these Jagirs, are put up for auction, and the people who are bidding are the new Hindu merchant classes, families like the Tagores, the Maliks, the Debs, and these families become, in a sense, absorbed into the new company world. They are doing very well, thank you, out of this new regime, and you know, it's other people who are being plundered, not them.
In fact, on the plunder, on the subject of this, you know, there is then soon the famine, you know, where I think the Bengal, some 1/3 of the Bengal people are dead.
1 million people.
1 million, and minimum.
That's the new revised estimates by Rajat Datta, who's brought it down from 5 million, which used to be the old figures. Even so, it's a colossal.
And you say in the book that even that year, the repatriation of the taxes that the company sends back, it's still growing. It's like
the shareholders are so thrilled that their, as they see it, their brilliant administration in Bengal manages to maintain revenues despite the famine, that the shareholders vote themselves an increased dividend from 10 to 12.5% in the middle of the famine.
So
1 million dead.
This it didn't shock anybody. I mean, it doesn't. It's very hard to imagine that. See, as you said, most of the shareholders are common people, right? I mean, they're like, so. I mean, a disaster like this, and yet you're making money out of it. How come in Britain nobody revolted again?
Well, this is actually the moment when the news breaks, really, that the company is up to no good in India, because the first year the reports haven't come of the real tragedy. But over the following couple of years, whistleblowers start sending in accounts to the Spectator
as to what exactly really is happening.
Spectator, the Gentleman's Magazine, Blackwood's, all these the 18th century journals, the Tatler, and these magazines published long front page stories about the hundreds of thousands of corpses lying in the streets of Calcutta, lying in the Ganges, being eaten by dogs and vultures. And this creates, I mean, I was that, in a sense, one of the big surprises of the research. I had no idea there was going to be such revulsion in Britain to this, because people have seen, it's a long way away, India. People, they don't know what's going on there. What they know is that people are coming back very rich and buying country houses and buying parliamentary seats, and suddenly, some guy who went out quite hard up has come back with huge amounts of money. But it's only in really 1772 that they put two and two together and realised that how it's been gathered. And Horace Walpole, for example, writes in his diary, I fear we have outdone the Spanish and the Portuguese in Latin America. They at least had the excuse of faith. We have done it merely for profit.
Do you think, even in some ways, even now, the colonial rule in present day Britain is kind of papered over? It's not sort of taught in this kind of detail, Britain in particular, and the European countries in general.
Correct. Well, there's two things to be said. First of all, in both countries, the East India Company period is kind of forgotten. All the popular fiction like Kim or Passage to India, or all the movies like Jewel in the Crown, they're all about the Raj, which is the bit that follows. It starts in 1858, it ends in 1947, the British government's in charge, Queen Victoria's the Empress, but it's only 90 years. It's only 90 years. The much longer period is the East India Company, which goes from 1599 to 1858.
Absolutely, yes.
250 years. And what's bizarre in a sense is that the East India Company, I could have a party game, try and name films about East India Company India. There's Janoon about the Great Uprising, Mangal Pandi. There is a very bad film by Ismail Merchant called The Deceivers about thugs, with Pierce Brosnan as a young company man. But I mean, that's kind of it. The great novels, the great films, as far as any of this at all impinges on public consciousness, it's the later period, and people have forgotten the company. But to answer more specifically your question about the British and their attitudes to empire, you're 100% correct. We've given ourselves a sort of completely clean chit about what went on, and persuaded ourselves that somehow our empire was the one that didn't do anything wrong, that just built hospitals and railways,
and so this
honourable, and absolutely fine, all for the good of the Indians. And of course that's bullshit, and you realise it most starkly when you study the company history, because the company at least didn't pretend to be about anything except for profit. Anything more than Goldman Sachs today is about anything except profit. It's there to make a profit. That's what it does.
True.
The company, it did it very well. Goldman Sachs does it very well today. But the company had no rhetoric about building railways or helping Indians civilize themselves, or the civilizing mission, the mission civilatrice, as the French called it. Instead, there's this, the company is completely clear about what it's up to. It's just trying to make money for its shareholders, and that's why people join it, and that's why people come out to India. So when you look at that, you realise how distorted British views about their own past are. We imagine that we were involved in some sort of benign transfer of knowledge from west to east, rather than just sucking the lifeblood out of the Indian economy, which is what quite a lot of it was actually about. And I mean, the company period and the Raj are different from each other. I'm not sure which is better and which is worse. In the company period, there's much more overt loot and plunder, particularly in the 1760s, 1770s, 1780s. But there's also a collaboration, And the collaboration isn't just the business that we talked about with the Jugget sets. There's also a lot of people doing business with Indian middlemen, with Indian labour. 1/3 of company men are either married to Indian women or leaving their goods to Anglo-Indian kids, according to the wills, which is the best way of, in a sense, peeking into people's bedrooms at that period. And they're living among Indians. They're not in civil lines or colonial clubs. They're up in hill stations. They're in the centre of Mughal Delhi, in Lucknow. Cockfighting, playing cards, watching the Nautch girls together. So that's one period, the company period. Then the Raj is, in a sense, more morally upright. It pretends to be there for reasons other than self enrichment. And it is true that in 1947, India probably has the best health system in Asia, the best communication system in Asia, certainly the best education system in Asia. So it isn't as if the Raj did nothing, but equally there's no question that the Raj has brought the economy down several pegs, while the European economy and British economy particularly have risen. And you have this racism of the Raj. The Raj, is no dogs and Indians on the streets in Simla, the clubs which Indians can't join, the civil service which actively discourages Indians initially from becoming part of it, and even when that's not overtly happening, the British are living in civil lines or cantonments or hill stations apart, and there's very little intermarriage. So there's two periods which are really quite different from each other, both in their morals and ethics, but also in their degree of collaboration and cohabitation.
Thank you very much, William. Actually, I can go on talking, I can go on listening to you about this, but not to give away too much from the book also. Thank you very much for joining Bibliofile. Thank you.